Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. I'm really excited about today's episode. We've got a fantastic fellow colleague and guest, David Pearce. He's a dentist and he's a coach. He's an entrepreneur, and we're going to talk all about business, increasing revenue, more time off. And I love talking with fellow healthcare professionals. And David, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Will. It's great to be on the show. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. Kind of tell your story and how you evolved into becoming an entrepreneur.
Sure. Well, maybe entrepreneurial is in my blood. At age 12, I had a little lawn mowing business with my silent partner, my mother, who provided the lawn mower and the gas and the transportation. And I did the marketing, which was the old age-old get out on foot and knock on doors. So that was intriguing to me. Never really wanted to be an employee. So aside from summer jobs, never have been an employee. Nothing wrong with being employees. You gotta have employees. So that's great. Just wasn't my path. And then dentistry. I've always been kind of a lifelong learner. I just enjoy the process of learning. So general dentist, but there's so many courses that allow you to move in different directions if you want to within the dental field. And so as I expose myself to those more and more specialized type procedures, clinical, my initial thought was you become a master of clinical procedures, and then people will flock to you and the business side will take care of itself. I don't know that there's probably somebody out there who would argue that that's true, but I would say no, that's not true for the huge vast majority, if not everybody. So at some point, having mastered those, I turned my attention to the business side and mostly to me. How do I make David a better version of David as a leader, as an owner of a business? And then as those skills got better, the business got better, and more patients said yes to more life-changing dentistry, which is really what we're offering. And when the team got more engaged and more on board, and out of all that, the natural side effect is more revenue. So that's sort of the path. And then I did that for maybe 38 years of growth. First 2 decades were painful at the very least. Pretty pathetic as far as my personal growth. But everybody has their own journey. After 38 years of clinical, I sold that business, and then the last 8 years or so, I've done some dabbling, if you will, on maybe coaching in a mastermind setting of other dentists on the business side. And then after I sold my practice, I focused my energies solely on the coaching side, and wrote a couple of books first part of this year on that, on money in general, and money and wealth. And it's been a fun journey.
Yeah. I love that. And what's interesting is a lot of my physician colleagues, because physicians, they're kind of bound to this W-2 employment model where you have to get hired by a hospital or a practice, and kind of dentists where they're more entrepreneurial because they can set up their practices and they know about marketing and sales, and so a lot of dentists are actually doing a lot better than doctors financially. Which is, we'll kind of talk about. So you talk about, in your practice, you talk about drastically increased revenue with more time off.
Right. So how do you do that, right? You don't want time to spend it, right? I think that it's that's been proven through many industries outside of dentistry that human production, on a typical week, that the end of day Thursday production is starting to drop, and you might as well not even show up on Friday. So any small business, that's working more than 4 days a week is really kind of kidding themselves as far as, are they truly being productive? One. And then two, if you look at the people's schedules and you kind of go back through it and you say, okay, good. So you have this many hours of capacity. If you were running a really well-oiled machine, of that, how many of those hours did you actually utilize? And if it's not, 100% all the time, then why are you even open? If you can't fill it, who are you kidding that you're going to fill it? Just condense it that way. And then also the same psychologists that look at the week would say that human, I wouldn't be knowledgeable enough to say was it limited strictly to the United States, because different cultures are different as to how they approach life and lifestyle. But in the United States, the idea of these same studies that talk about a 4-day, end of day Thursday, Friday, and the productivity dropping. We're also saying somewhere at the 4, 5, 6 week period that the human mind needs a break, other than the weekend, which oftentimes isn't necessarily a break because it's so regimented kids and activities. So if you looked at that and said, well, you never should work more than a 4-day week, and every 4 to 5 weeks of work, you should close for something more than a weekend. So even if you just follow that path, you're going to end up probably taking more than 2, 3, 4 weeks a year off. And so for us, we would take off 12 to 14 weeks a year, at least a week a month, just shut the office down completely. As we did more and more of that time off, our productivity, just numbers, became greater. That grew. So the dollars per hour of revenue grew. And I don't think it's like magic. There's a lot of science, economic science behind why that works.
Yeah. I love that. Because you're talking about scaling time, and that's using systems and employees, and because a lot of doctors are so used to this trading time for money model, where you're basically seeing patient, basically for each patient or procedure or whatever you get paid, but you're talking about how you create systems and processes where people or software, AI, all do all of this, and then that frees up your time. Which you talk about, we're talking about how entrepreneurship, you can take much more time off while making more money. Talk about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, the cliche is, you take time off so you can work on the business, not in the business. And so I have certainly always noticed that my very best thinking time has been oftentimes initially it'd be like accidental. Like I would go to a course, I'd have a very tight regimen scheduled at the course for learning, and then I'd get the very, very next plane, get home as fast as I could to wife and children and business. And then every once in a while, those darn airlines, they'd screw up, and I'd have to spend the night in a hotel. Couldn't, flight was canceled. And be like, oh, this is horrible. And then what I'd find is like, but like when I looked at that, I said, but here's an opportunity to take all that information you have, to process it through, how would I incorporate it, who would do what, really lay out a plan. So I went back to the office and said, here's the big picture, here's how this fits in the big picture, here's what everybody does, here's what I do, here's how we're going to roll it out slowly, here's what's going to look like 3 months, 6 months, whatever. That really was just something when I started paying attention to that. It's like, I become very effective. And anybody would become much more effective if you get yourself in a different environment where time is on your side, and you have time to actually think about what's going on in your office without anybody interrupting that. One, and then two, if you can have some other folks you can bounce ideas off of, not necessarily a full-blown coach like I do, although I think that's the best scenario, but if you just have other folks that you admire that you can reach out to once in a while and say, so like, how would you handle this? In what circumstances would you do this? And they can just give you, their shoot from the hip comments. That combination is great, but if you don't have the time to process it, that's like, you're just wasting it's going to be, same old thing, looking for different results, the definition of stupidity. And I was guilty of that for decades. So I think we all are. So so that time off, of course, all that time off isn't meant to focus on the business. That's probably where it starts, so take some time off. And even for me, at one point in time, I went to my wife and said, I'd like to do this like 2 days a year. I'm going to check into a hotel like on Thursday night in my town. I'm going to spend Thursday night there. I'm going to spend the next day there, get a late checkout, and then I'm going to come home. And then I want you to do the same thing, so you don't feel like I'll take care of the kids. So you could go off with your buddies, get a girlfriend, get a whatever. So it's not like all about me. And whether she takes me up on that or not, but that offer is sincere. But if you don't have, it's not a home vacation or a staycation or whatever people call it, but it kind of is, because you don't have to leave town. Just get yourself out of the office and out of the house. So go to Embassy Suites or Hilton or Motel 6, wherever you want, to someplace where you can be by yourself. And that's a really simple solution for any listener. Anybody can do that. It says, well, I don't have time for an airplane and this. It's like, get in your car, drive 5 miles, and you'll be in a totally different place if you write yourself. And
Yeah, I love that. And basically, once an entrepreneur learns how to sever the relationship between time and money, basically you're making money, independent of your time. And then you talk about how you can leverage office revenue into maximum wealth accumulation. This is kind of talking about your earned income and then putting it into safe investments. Kind of talk about that, because a lot of doctors, they basically make a bunch of money and then they buy fancy houses, cars, vacations, and by the time they're 70, they have nothing. So kind of talk about that.
Yeah, I love that topic. And actually, the first book I wrote is called Fancy or 4M40. You can have it all, you just can't have it all now. So it's that exact same thing, and I think there's such a trap. And that's really my word that, as a young professional, especially medical, your buddies, I'm not sure about your path, but I had a lot of good buddies in college. So some of them went on to masters, some of them just plain jumped into investment banking or things like that. So right out of college, they were earning money. And for me, 4 years, and then for physicians at least 4 more years after that, and it's especially another 4 years. So you got 6 years after college, 8 years after college or more, where you're earning enough to get by, maybe still accumulating student debt. So compared to your buddies, like your debt's way up here, and while you're creating more debt, they're creating income, and their income path is 4, 5, 6 years ahead of yours. And then you get out and you think like, well, I should have what my college buddy. You see that pressure of that. And I think maybe even worse, Dr. Lou, is that like society looks at it and says, well, Dr. Lou, you're an MD. You're a PhD MD. Like you should be living in that house. And you should be driving that car. And your kids should be going to that school. And like there's all this, like, what's wrong with you? Like, you must be a failure if you aren't doing those things. So there's kind of that self-worth thing. I want to do these things that my buddies are. And then society is saying like you should. And then maybe, of course, the credit industry says, yeah, you should be using this little card and buying this stuff for sure. Yeah. Go do that. But when you just look at the math of that compounding, debt against you, or compounding, revenue, investments, savings for you, and you look at those graphs, it's just how scary, how amazing it is. Maybe it's the right word, when you start early and just, and let that just naturally rise. Somewhere around like 15, 20 years, that graph just starts to like just take off on its own. But it takes that long to really do it, and it doesn't matter how much you're putting in, but it's more start early. And to me, it seems like it's so simple, but it's not easy. If you remember back to your college, and then professional, any sort of post college education, whatever that is, PhD, whatever that path, and you look at how you're living, unless you were somehow financed by your parents or a spouse that's working and doing very, very well, you're kind of living on the cheap, like, because you haven't got a lot of money, and you're okay with it. Like, that's what you always have. Even if you grew up in a fancy house and all this other stuff, you're still like, hey, this is all I got. So somehow we go from that mentality to, and in that book, I'm just suggesting, like, well, just give yourself a little bit of fancy stuff. Just give yourself a little bit of luxury. Just kind of like ease it in there, as long as you're just siphoning money off. And the siphoning part for me should be like, just make it. It's not a big decision. Just decide like one decision once, which is I'm going to take like this much money. It's going to go right out of my business into an account, and I don't ever touch it. And I never have to write a check. I don't do any of that. It just goes away, and I don't touch it. So it's not it's not like every week you have to say, okay, I have to write this check to myself again. And then like, no, and it's gone. So, and the folks that do that, like exactly to your point, so the 4 on 4 is how do you get $4 million in an investment account at age 40? So you do that, and then, it's hard to know like how much money you think you need, at retirement, or what retirement is and so forth. But you do that and you just let it sit there, and at age 62, 65, you got 23, 4, 5, 6 million just sitting in that account. And, for most folks, that's enough. You can have a pretty good lifestyle when you're debt free with 25 million sitting in an account. But if you don't start it when you're young, it's so painful and hard to do it later on. Or to your point, it never happens. You're 62, 65, 66, 70, 72, and how come you're still working? And the real reason is because I have to. Everything falls apart if I don't. It's so sad.
Yeah. It's quite interesting. Once you realize, kind of, because your age and your health and is kind of on the decline, and then basically to keep up with inflation and taxes, and all this volatility, you have to let your money work for you. And compound is like the strongest force.
Yes.
And the more you start saving, the earlier you get in, the faster, the more critical mass, which is so key for doctors. It's quite interesting because it's in 2008, it was you could get a car loan, but they wouldn't give you a loan to buy a house. So it's kind of like, you see where the industry is, their incentives are aligned to get you in the consumer debt. So kind of talk about this idea of so kind of team and building a great culture, leadership, kind of talk about, those ideas.
Yeah, sure. Well, so, again, on all this stuff, Dr. Wu, I'm going to just be the messenger. Like, I don't think I ever had, to my credit, I maybe had one original idea that's there's none. I'm just a good enough student to say, let's look at ideas and let's see what seems to work. And I'll qualify all that by saying, that of course leadership is learned. For some people, maybe it's easier for them to learn than other people, but it's a learned thing. Nobody is born being an amazingly great leader. Certainly has nothing to do with personality. That big charisma is like that can even be a liability sometimes, in a leadership role. So if for folks that are listening and say, "Yeah, I just haven't got what you got," it's like, "Yeah, you have everything that I got for sure. I can tell you." And one thing about me, certainly even to this day, is I'm not a big fan of confrontation. Like that's like I'd rather run away than by confrontation of those feeling like difficult conversations that you might have with an employee. Say. So for me, that putting in a structure into the small business, which really kind of started at the top, which is like what is the purpose of this business? Like in a sentence or less, so for us it was, essentially what we were doing was changing people's lives. And so our mantra became, changing people's lives one smile at a time. So everything we looked at and said, like, are we truly changing somebody's life this way? And smile is just a generic type thing, like we're smiling, everybody's there's joy in what we're doing. So that was kind of that thing. So everything gets bounced off of that. And right underneath that was when we're hiring and looking at things at the individual level, are our beliefs and the virtues that people have to have on this team. So this is who the individuals are. And then the third layer was really like an organizational board or accountability chart or something like that, which is kind of like, so this is everybody, this is all the positions in the office. Here's the positions, and then whose name are we going to put next to that position? So therefore, they're in charge, and do they accept responsibility for that? And that's a verbal yes, I do. I have the ability, I understand what I need to do, and I want that position. Okay, good. So at that point, at least when things didn't work out, then I wasn't the bad guy or the good guy. I was more just a quality control person that could just kind of look at who we are and say, so that stuff that happened yesterday, let's just look at this from the standpoint of when we are at our best. Like we as a unit are functioning at our best and are really focused on our purpose of changing people's lives. Does what happened yesterday fit into that the best we can be? And usually if I'm going to bring that up, it's because it doesn't. But at the same point, that allows everybody to look at that and say, yeah, no, that is. Okay, good, fine. So how do we change that so it doesn't happen again? Because it will, left-hand side will happen again. How do we change that as a team? What do we do differently? What does that look like? What we have to change systems, we have to change this, whatever that looks like. So that's as a group we could look at that. And then if somebody was doing something that I looked at and said, I just don't feel that fit, then at least I could say, we talked here about like being like, say, like lifelong learners. Like that's who we're committed to. That's who we are. We keep learning. And we had this thing yesterday, and it was obvious that you didn't read the part of the book, and you even said that you're supposed to. So help me understand how that action fits in with a lifelong learner. This is who I am as part of this team. Because I'm sure it does in some way, but I can't see it. Explain that to me. And it with a true sense of like I caught you and I'm gonna beat you up. There's more like you're a great employee. I know you are. That's why you're here. You're working hard. But I see a disconnect, and I want you to explain to me why it's not a disconnect. And if there might be, well, here's what was going on. Here's this. Like that's great. Now I understand. Perfect. Okay, good. Or it might be like, well, blah blah blah. Excuse. But I know excuses are worthwhile. You're right. I just need. I won't let it happen again. Actually. Okay. Awesome. And then if something gets dropped in the office, just look at say, okay, good. So like the XYZ didn't happen. Who's in charge of that? Well, there's the chart. There's the position. There's the name. You are. And so how come it didn't happen? Like, and we talk about that once a week. We just look at things. Okay, here's this, who's in charge, what's going on, all that kind of stuff. So for me, the idea of leadership, that one is that I think virtually every employee, I'd like to think this at least, would love to work in a place that has a mission that's bigger than that. Like they would love to be in a place like this place is doing things that totally align with who I am and doing it in a really big way that we never do on it. So they really want to be there for that reason. It's not all about the money or that stuff. That's the main reason. I truly believe that everybody wants to have that. Not
Yeah.
everybody, but most everybody. You're just not in the right place, the right spot.
Yeah.
And so once you have the right people, you're hiring those right people, then that other part of it, they look at it and just say, because there are some people are just like, yeah, I just don't want to do it anymore. Awesome. That's cool. Like, we'll help you find some place that doesn't care whether you do it or not. And we'll find somebody to take your place here that does. Okay. But it became much less confrontational, and having that hierarchy in there, people like the real, like the Michael Jordans that you want on your team, they could kind of look at that and say, so in this environment, I know exactly what I need to do to be a rock star. If I do this, this, and this amazingly well, then I'm going to be killing. And I think the Michael Jordans of the world love that, as opposed to I could do everything right, and I have no clue, one, if I'm doing it right or doing it not, or somebody say, well, that was your job. No, it was your job. I did it yesterday. Well, all that kind of stuff is like, that just kind of helps get rid of that. Allows the rock stars to be amazing.
Yeah. How can people contact you, follow you on social media, check out your book, reach out to you, etc.?
Yeah, sure. Well, at my website, I'm really transparent, very easy to find, Dr. Lou. Website is it's a little bit different. So the website name of the company is Ultimate Success in Dentistry. That's my coaching business. The website is ultimatesuccess.dentist. That book I talked about with the 4M40. Also, you can go to 4m40.com. But this is a link that brings it back in, which for some folks is easier to remember. And then, basically on there, you can find me through their LinkedIn, YouTube channels, Facebook, so all those sites are right on there. You can easily find those. And the weekly blogs on YouTube are always interesting on leadership and business development. So a couple book offers on there for folks that check it out. So yeah, lots of good stuff.
Yeah. Awesome.
And then the first published book called Peak Success, an entrepreneurial guide to prosperity, is available on Amazon maybe even like tomorrow, 13th of November. It's its official launch date on Amazon. So that's available as well.
Nice. And for all the audience out there, let's thank Jeff for coming on and really talking about really entrepreneurship. All of David's resources will be in the links and show notes. And be sure to check out his book on Amazon. Check it out. Leave a great review. Follow him on all his socials. And with that, thanks so much for coming onto the podcast.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, definitely. Thank you. Appreciate all you're doing for the rest of us out here to make our days easier. It's great. Awesome.